Hello and welcome! Today we'll be talking about lockpicking. This guide uses many other videos as sources. They will either be at the video description or in a pinned comment. Now let's begin. First we'll talk about how most locks normally work. Most common locks look like this on the inside, and this is how it operates. Without a key in the lock, the driver pins are pushed downwards, preventing the plug from rotating. When an incorrect key is inserted into the lock, the key pins and driver pins do not align with the sheared line. Therefore, it does not allow the plug to rotate. When the correct key is inserted, the gaps between the pins align with the shear line, the plug can rotate freely. Now that you understand how a lock normally works, let's talk about how lockpicking works. I bought this exact model of kit and it serves me well. Let's first talk about the most basic tool in it. Number 1, hook picks. They look like hooks. You insert them into the lock and manually lift each individual binding pin one at a time. They come in different shapes and sizes. I personally use them all, but you may grow to have a preference for one or another. They require skill to use, but getting good with them is rewarding, as they're the ones who are most capable of dealing with special pins. Number 2, rakes. They have this wave-like pattern. You insert them into the lock and move them forwards and backwards, up and down, changing angles in an attempt to affect multiple pins in different ways. Numbered in blue is the city rake. It's called that because it kind of looks like the skyline of a city. All rakes are capable of opening regular pin locks fairly quickly, but the city rake is often even faster, sometimes taking less than 5 seconds. All rakes don't require much skill to use, especially the city rake. It's extremely forgiving to newbies, and that brings me to my next point. I am glad not too long after getting my kit, I unknowingly met a special pin lock that caused me to break my city rake. Had that not happened, I would probably not have put as much effort into learning all the other picks, and that would have considerably limited my understanding and skill of lockpicking. So keep your city rake, but don't see it as the only pick worth trying out. Additionally, I'm pretty sure rakes have a lower life expectancy than other picks because all the movements done during their operation causes weakening of the metal and eventually they break. Source: my last rake broke just a few days before writing this guide, and I use the hooks way more. One last thing, the shorter rakes can also be used for zipping, the main attack method of our next type of pick. Number 3, half diamonds. They are triangle shaped and kind of look like half of a diamond, I guess. Their main attack method is being inserted all the way at the back of the lock and being pulled out really quickly so the pins are bounced into place. The effectiveness of this varies. Some people can get it open instantly, while I need to do it multiple times with different pressures, and often still have to use their secondary attack method, single pin picking like a hook. You can also use them somewhat well in a similar way to a rake. They are very versatile. Number 4, ball rakes. Can also be called snowmen because it looks like one. There are other forms like half ball rakes and ones where it's a singular circle. These can be used in a regular lock, but their real utility comes when picking wafer locks. I have never picked a wafer lock because I can't find one, with the exception of car locks, and I can't legally pick that. But from the videos I've watched about wafer locks, you just insert the snowman, do some rake motions, and it should open. Yeah, unfortunately I just can't talk much about wafer locks as I haven't had the opportunity to pick them. Number 5, broken key extractor. As the name suggests, it isn't actually made for picking, but instead to hook onto a broken key stuck in a lock and pull it out in order to save the lock. Despite that, I can still use it like a hook and pick locks with it. Number 6. Tensioners. They come in multiple shapes and thicknesses, but they mostly serve the same purpose, applying tension to the core of the lock by trying to turn it. What tensioner you choose to use is often up to personal preference, but sometimes some may be too thick or too thin to be worth using for that particular locking keyway. Example: some keyways are quite small and require you to either switch to a thinner tensioner or keep your current one and position it on the top of the keyway in order to make room for your pick of choice to enter and operate. Number 7. Wide tensioners. These are made for wafer locks and provide tension at both the top and bottom of the keyway. Once again, I can't say much about it because I haven't got experience with wafer locks. Now that you know the tools, let's talk about the picking process with different types of lock. We'll mostly be talking about single pin picking because the actions of the other pick types have already more or less been explained in the tools section. But before we begin, take a look at the different types of pins that there are. There are many different types and variations of pins, but in the vast majority of locks, you'll be dealing with regular pins and with spool pins. Sometimes with serrated pins as well. Regular pins aren't very noteworthy. You just push them up when possible and they just go. Spool and serrated pins, on the other hand, have gimmicks, but we'll be talking about those on their own sections. Let's begin with number 1, a standard pin padlock. You will position your tensioner and ready your pick of choice. Begin applying tension to the core. How much tension? That's for now up to personal preference. Light tension takes longer to tire you out. Heavy tension makes it easier for you to notice a binding pin and makes a louder click when it sets, but it tires you faster. I personally go for a balanced approach and use mild tension. You will then begin inserting the pick. What you are looking for is pins that are binding. Due to manufacturing tolerances, the parts inside a lock aren't exactly the same size. This means that some pins get stuck against the core before others, allowing you to push them up and now they'll stay up with other pins now stuck. Push them up as well until they're all correctly positioned and allow the core to turn. A stuck pin is a binding pin. They can be recognized by pushing a pick against a pin. If you feel a springiness that the pin is easily moving, that means it's not a binding pin and it isn't ready to be picked yet. On the other hand, if you push against the pin and feel resistance, that it's stuck, it's probably the binding pin. Push it up until you hear a click. With that heard, it's now time to look for the next binding pin. So you insert your pick and slowly advance inside the lock, probing the pins until you find the one binding, and push it up until you hear a click. Now what you do is up for personal preference. You can either retreat the pick all the way back to the first pin and begin probing again from there, or you can continue probing until the end of the lock and only then going back to the front and continuing the process. If everything goes correctly, you will eventually have all the pins set and the tension will begin making the now unobstructed core turn until the lock opens. Now what could happen that makes things go incorrectly? Well, first is an overset pin. That being, you pushed it up too far and it's now blocking the car's movements again. The simpler way of detecting this is that you keep looking in the lock for a binding pin, but nothing happens and the lock won't open. To fix this, you can try releasing some tension until you hear 1 or 2 pins fall back down. Find and try to set them. If that doesn't work, you may have to release all tension so all pins fall back down and begin the picking process all over again. There are more advanced ways of detecting and dealing as well as preventing overset pins, but I haven't got much experience with them, so I don't feel confident talking about it. Fortunately, one of the linked videos at the end covers this. Then there's underset pins. Those can be similar to the overset ones in that you pick, and the lock won't open. But this time, the problem is caused by pins that are still too low. Often, it's the first pin, but can be others as well. Look for, find, and set them. If that was the problem, the lock should open. An alternative single pin picking process will be getting the pick all the way to the end of the lock and begin probing as you retreat back to the front. Up for personal preference, but also good to try if you are struggling to open the lock the other way. Number 2. Spool pin padlocks. A padlock like this features at least one spool pin, but typically you won't find one that only has spools for reliability reasons. Instead, it would be a setup like 5 spool pins and 1 regular or serrated pin. If it were all spools, the car would have a lot of wobble due to that big open space spools have in the middle, making the shear line have a lot of room to shake around. This can make it hard to insert the key, so at least 1 regular pin is necessary for stabilization. That open space is the spool security feature. When the regular pin has already been set, you will likely notice the car will turn a slight bit but won't open. That's what's called a false set. It's caused by the spool pins now being the only ones attempting to hold the car. The name false set sounds like a bad thing, but it's in that state that you can actually set the pins correctly. Now what you are looking for isn't just binding, but counter rotation. Counter rotation is what happens when you push a spool up. It's the lower portion of the spool that's stuck trying to force the car back, so it can go into place and you will feel in your tensioner as if something is pushing against it, trying to rotate to the opposite direction that you are pushing. Now you want to slowly and carefully release a little bit of tension so the spool is allowed to go into place and be set. You must be careful, otherwise the pins you have already set may fall down because of it. That's also a security feature. Another thing that may cause set pins to fall back down is the picking order. As stated previously, the parts inside a lock aren't exactly the same size. So if you push a spool pin that's a tiny bit thicker than another pin, even if you release the right amount of tension, the thinner pin will fall back down. Ignoring the picking order can result in you eternally lifting pins just to hear others fall back down and the lock never to open. To follow the picking order, you must be looking for the spool that offers the greatest amount of counter rotation. Some pins may still fall, but as long as you are following that directive, you should eventually get the lock to open. Another thing to note is that the spool pins are specifically designed to defeat low skill type attacks, such as raking or zipping. It may still be possible to do it, but it's certainly very, very difficult. You could still, however, rake to a false set and then follow up with single pin picking. Let's go through what picking a spool pin padlock might look like. You must apply a light or mild amount of tension. High tension may not allow you to feel the counter rotation. You position your tensioner and ready your hook. You insert the hook and look for binding pins. You find one, push it, and luckily it was the regular pin that stabilized everything. With him out of the picture, for now you fall into a false set. In the false set, you look for the pin that offers the greatest amount of counter rotation. Push and set him. You do that a couple more times until you hear a pin fall. You either look for that pin and try to push him up again, or continue trying to push up the pin that offers the greatest amount of counter rotation. You keep following this until the lock eventually opens. Do also keep in mind that other problems like overset and underset pins can still occur. Now would be number 3, serrated pin locks. Keyword: would. Like with wafer locks, I was unable to find an example of a lock with serrated pins to pick, so since I don't feel much confidence about this, I'll just link some tutorials about it, as well as the other tutorials that have helped me learn about other subjects. Number 3. Door locks. The picking part of the picking process on a door lock is pretty much the same as with padlocks. Both the regular pin and security pin ones. The differences you will encounter from a padlock to a door come from the fact the mechanism is being used for the functionalities of a door, not the mechanism itself. The first thing of note is that a door lock mechanism can turn both ways. To one direction it opens, to the other it closes. Therefore, you must make sure you are tensioning towards the desired direction. To determine which direction opens the lock, all you need to do is look at what side of the lock the part that holds the door closed is located. By that I mean the piece of metal that comes out of the door and goes into the wall, preventing an opening. If it's located on the left side, you must tension to turn the core clockwise. If on the right side, counterclockwise. Also remember that this will obviously be reversed if you go to the other side of the door. Another thing of note is that after you have successfully picked open the door, there is a chance the core will get stuck about halfway through rotation. I think this is caused by 1 or 2 driver pins popping out of the shear line and getting stuck on the core. The solution I found for that was taking a pick and using its flat side to try and push all the driver pins back into their place, unobstructing the path of the core. After all of that, if the door lock was turned twice towards the lock, you will have to repeat the whole process again. Now, a thing that may go for all lock types is that if they are too old and rusty, it may be impossible to open them. My guess is the rust leads to too much attrition, and the tensioner simply does not provide enough force to overcome the attrition. Some form of lubrication or degreaser could help with this, but I've never tested it myself. I think the most valuable general tip I can give is to be calm. It may take some time for you to open some locks and get good. You can't brute force a lock too much, otherwise you risk breaking your picks. So be calm. Now here's what you should buy to train lockpicking. Well, obviously the most important thing would be a lockpicking set, similar to the one that I bought. It's simple and has a very low cost. There are certainly better, much more professional kits out there that come with a bunch of different picks and tensioners, but those are much more expensive, setting the barrier to entry way higher than it needs to be. You just don't need that sort of thing to learn the basics. There are also leashy tools or picks. From what I've seen, they are pretty much like an upgraded lockpick. They are pretty cool and certainly have their learning benefits, but are also much more expensive. Again, a higher barrier to entry. With the tools in hand, you now need something to open with them. And I know you may be thinking, oh, I have plenty of doors and padlocks around my house, I'll just use those. But no, you must not use locks that you rely upon for training. It would be very bad to accidentally jam your front door or the padlock that locks your front gate, garage or shed. Instead, I'll recommend you to begin by buying one of those transparent padlocks. They'll teach you the very basics, like how pins feel like and whatnot. I would, however, not recommend them for actual use as a padlock, as they are designed to be easily picked open. After you had enough of the transparent padlock, I recommend buying a real normal padlock, maybe 2. Make sure they are of a larger size, about 45 or 50 millimeters. Then maybe consider getting a small one, just to get an idea of how they feel. After you've got good enough with regular pins, it's time to get a padlock with special security pins. The manufacturers who use special pins in their locks vary from country to country. You'll have to do your own research. After that, consider also getting a door lock. I once went over to a locksmith and asked if he had any door locks for sale for lockpicking practice. He then gave me 2 for free. Must have been some locks whose keys were lost, or something like that. Most of this stuff can easily be bought on the internet. With that, you should have your basics covered. Well, this is it. Again, all sources are at the video description or comment section. Thank you for watching.